Who's ready to talk buyer fatigue?
It's a real thing.
It is a real
It's
thing.
happening a lot right now.
Who's experiencing it?
Right now? Yep.
Donald?
Hi, how are you?
Jamie, are you getting any buyer fatigue?
That one, I got close, so I've been working, so I've been keep check the records, so I've been working with them since February.
Yeah.
So I'm
Hang on one
close
sec.
May.
February, that's a long time.
Yeah, this is my family.
I've been working with somebody since June.
It's from 6 houses. So,
I've had clients that took
Part
3 years
one.
to get into a house. So it's not a competition, but what today's training, today's video is going to be about is what are some of the symptoms, what to be on the lookout for, what are kind of the negative sides of not being skilled at this, and how do you solve it for your clients, but also make sure it doesn't affect you. Because when you're working with somebody for 6 months, it's a little easy for you to get down a little bit, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right? And so we don't want that for any of our clients. We certainly don't want it for any of our brokers. So I think today's training is going to be really powerful, but it's also going to be pretty interactive because I want you guys to get involved, share. We're going to end it with maybe some of the techniques that you guys use. After I sort of stir up some thoughts in your heads, we'll brainstorm this. And there's more than one way to deal with it, but the key is you got to deal with it, right?
Yeah.
So we'll start there. What's the absolute worst case scenario when buyer fatigue goes unchecked?
Loss of communication.
They fire you,
Or, yeah. I
switch
guess
to
that's
somebody
the
new.
ultimate worst.
right? They quit is bad. They get fed up, they don't want to make offers. What's worse than that is they don't quit, but they use someone else, right? So, and the reason for that is psychologically, if I'm having a negative experience as a buyer and you're with me every time I have that negative experience or that feeling, I start associating it and projecting it on you, right? So we have to really be in tune to this. So let's dive in, right? We're going to talk about how do you recognize it. We're going to talk about how you diagnose it. Then we'll talk about how you treat it and how to keep it from spreading to you. All right? We're gonna basically do an autopsy on buyers. How's that?
Great.
It's a good thing. All right. So, what are some of the things that you notice that now, when you think of the context of buyer fatigue, that you would lump into this? What are some of the symptoms?
Give up looking,
Yeah.
or, you know, at least just,
Yeah, they get tired of looking,
stop responding.
unresponsive. You kind of added the apathy at the end of your comment, Mark, which is true, right? They're like, why bother, right? And what else?
Disconnected, disengaged.
Totally.
Yeah. Still
Right.
looking, but disengaged.
Takes a lot of different forms, but it all boils down to that, right? So they're less interested in looking at houses that come on, right? Even houses that you think, man, this one actually is more perfect than any of the other ones.
Hits every box.
And they're like, meh, right? Self-deprecating talk,
Yeah.
right? Oh man, why bother? We're just gonna get our teeth kicked in. They're gonna give me 19 other offers and we're gonna come in 19th. Whatever, right? It's all pretty negative.
Well, they just set the tone.
They what?
They just said they'll be 19th, so they'll be 19th.
You're right. Yeah.
They
It's
just-
self-fulfilling prophecy,
Exactly.
right? It says it right there on the wall. Whether you think you can or you think you can't,
You're right.
you're right.
Right? Yep.
Do you remember who said that?
Ford.
Henry Ford, that's right.
There's a lot of people that say it.
Right?
Will Smith said it.
I think Henry might have said it earlier. Longer lengths of time. You leave a voicemail or you shoot an email and you don't hear anything but crickets, right? Those are some really telltale signs that they might be lumping you into the blame game as well. So that's never good. Right? And then just apathy, Mark pointed out at the beginning. So they're all symptoms of kind of a prevailing theme, which is they're feeling beaten, right? And you can't help but feel a sense of loss. When you invest emotionally in a house enough to write an offer, because think about how the buyer's brain works. When I write an offer, I chose to buy that house,
Right.
right? It's not just, am I gonna write an offer that I got contingencies and I can parachute out of and pull the plug? No, they think, yeah, this is the one.
Especially in this.
Especially in this market, that's right. And then they lose, it can be devastating. I've had clients where they only wrote one offer and were devastated and got out of the market because of that, right? You have to be really careful and really in tune to recognize these things. Or when you send one, they say, oh, great, right? Does it have a review date? Who's had that? Hey, here's a good house. It meets all your requirements and nice to haves. Oh, great. Does it have a review date? Because what does a review date mean to a buyer?
Computation.
Multiple offers.
Competition, that's right. Good morning.
Morning, hi
Hi.
everyone.
We have,
Nice to meet you
we have
somewhere.
Yeah,
spare
please.
chairs.
Should I grab one?
Right over there.
You can sit over here. Here's one that's only holding a.
But you have to sing first, being
No,
late, that's
we
what
don't
the
want
rule
that.
is.
It's not a good.
Guest speaker.
Did you keep going or something?
Yeah.
I thought
Can
the
you see
two
the
bouncers
screen?
were coming out of Blake's office.
So we can do
They
short
are.
introductions.
Two what?
Xavier
The two bouncers.
is thinking about getting his license, so welcome. And like I said earlier, and this is true for you as well, Heidi, we train every Wednesday. So if you want more training while you're deciding, show up as often as you'd like. We have had people where I eventually pulled them aside and said, I'm not going to train you for your whole career. Can you at least sign up?
Yeah.
Heidi actually is already licensed and is thinking about making a move. All right. So review dates, right? If I'm a buyer and you tell me there's a review date, I guarantee in my mind that I'm assuming there's 19 other offers, right? Because remember, buyers think every house on the market is going to sell over asking. And did you know on average they do? The average sale in the MLS is 100.4% of asking price.
Is that all?
That is all. And that's a manipulated number, because lots of agents
Right.
reduce the list price before they take it pending because they want to pad their stats. And it's a percentage of the list price at sale, so it doesn't reflect price reduction.
So it's fake, that's dishonest.
Right. Now, our listings, we measure from original list price, and our listings sell at 103.8. So you should have that locked in your head, and you should drive that point home when you're sitting in somebody's living room talking about, you should hire me. And you should ignore the Zestimate, because it's bullshit. I'm messing with you.
Everybody hates that.
If you have time, go into Facebook and type Ed Lane Zestimate.
Okay.
And you'll see a blog that I wrote over the period of time that Spencer Raskoff had his home listed in Madison Park.
Mhm.
And it's pretty funny. Because I'm pretty funny.
Yeah, my rental that I just sold,
Yeah.
the Zestimate was 150% over what it sold for.
Well, with
And I had
this
that.
estimate, they can't go inside. That's what makes it different. Most agents.
You sound like a
It's-
salesman for Zillow.
I'm not being a salesman for Zillow. Yes, I work for them, but it's something I have to deal with every day. You're looking on the outside of a house, and you're guessing what's
Right.
inside of
Right.
it.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not going to be accurate.
Totally.
Yeah.
We sell the
Guesstimate,
same
not
way,
Zestimate.
right?
Yeah.
Spencer, his estimate was 1.5 million when he listed. He listed at 1.3. So my initial post was, look at that, even the CEO of Zillow ignores his estimate, and he listed $200,000 under.
Yeah.
Took him 140 days to sell. He did 4 price reductions along the way. Finally sold at 1.05 million.
Wow.
So his estimate was off by 450,000.
Mm.
In the 140 days it took to sell, it went from 1.5 to 1.7. So when the dust settled, he sold it for 1.05, and his estimate was 1.7 million. So he was off by 65% at the time. Not he, but this algorithm, right? So, and the LA Times actually ran that article like a week later after it closed, which was cool. All right, so back to buyer fatigue, right? They've got all these symptoms, they're not responding to you, they're apathetic, they're just kind of feeling meh, right? If they're already in that mode, you may have already lost them. I mean, you have to recognize these things the first time they happen, not realize it and look back and go, gosh, they've kind of been in this fog for a month now, or a week, or something in between. When they feel discouraged, they often blame those that are nearby.
Yeah.
Who's nearby? Right? We are. Selena's smiling back there, right? You can't help it. It's human nature, right? If Selena's my agent, she's showing me houses, and we're writing offer after offer and getting our teeth kicked in over and over again, over time, I'm either going to just view her as a negative, like, you're just bad karma, Selena. I gotta replace you because we're not a good team here. And it can happen even though I like her. I could just feel like, you know, it's just bad luck. I'm gonna hire Heidi because we're just not having good luck, right? It could also be even worse. It could be, you're not very good at your job. My friends wrote an offer and they got their first offer accepted. That's a good agent. You're not a good agent, right? And we all know that every house is different. We all know that, I mean, I've had houses where I had 97 offers. I've had houses where I had one offer and they wrote 100 over the asking price. It's a mixed bag, right? You do your best to predict it, but you never know for certain. So that's why you make sure they write, right? But if you're nearby and you don't help them break through this fog, it's going to reflect on you. All right? It's true, we as brokers can oftentimes be a reminder of sadness, and so they don't want to be around anything that makes them sad. Has anyone had that happen to them before? Am I the only one? Really? Good job. I'm a slow learner, what can I tell you? That's why the slow or non-existent calls, emails, and showings are proof that you're too late, right? So you have to be ready to recognize it when it happens. And the key is, if you're working with a couple, it only takes one of them to be grieving for you to get fired, right? It takes two of them to move forward in this process, but it only takes one of them to decide they don't want to move forward anymore, right? Shrek's dealing with it right now. He's got a wife that is on tilt and a husband who's like apologizing. That sucks. But those of you that are married know that's kind of what you do. Happy wife, happy life, right?
Preach.
All right. So when you suspect it, you got to probe, right? Ask them questions like, how are you feeling? Do you think we're making progress? I felt like that last one, even though we lost, we're getting closer, right? You have to be the cheerleader in this. And when you ask open-ended questions like that, be willing to listen. Because a lot of times we aren't really asking a question, even though it ends in a question mark, and a lilt at the end, we don't really care what they say in response, right? Humans are funny that way. How you doing? How you doing is pig Latin for I don't really give a shit how you're doing, right? I just feel like I gotta say that. Xavier, how you doing, man?
But what if you do care?
You
People say, I'm
say
good.
it with
This is all right.
stronger. I was coaching,
Look him in the eye.
Andrew yesterday on the gold brick, and I'm like, it needs to drip in emotion and sincerity. And I made him record it, and I'm like, more dripping. We need more.
What's funny is people were conditioned. You say, how are you? And, I'm good. Then I go, no, but how are you? And they're like,
How's your soul?
man, like, right.
Right.
That's what I mean. Let's get it out.
Then the truth comes out.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. Then you hear about everything. Like, okay, great. Now I know how to handle.
He asked me last week. We just met.
And
Did
you
you
said
give him
good.
the-
And I said, how are you? And you're like, yeah, yeah.
You did the restatement?
Mhm.
Nice. You have to have an inquisitive mind, right? I mean, our world would be a better place if we all cared more about each other.
That's truth.
In real estate, you will not survive if you don't care about your clients. And you demonstrate that by having an inquisitive mind, like Yaron did with Mark, like you should do with every one of your clients, right? So when you ask questions like this, listen to their response, ask another question. You have to be probing and inquisitive. That's how you demonstrate to people that you care. Right? What's their favorite topic? Themselves. So you ask them questions about themselves, their kids, their life, their spouse, right? And then you can challenge them. Do you feel like we're on the right track, or do you feel like we should be more aggressive? Here's a great text exchange example that I wrote last night to a client. So her text is, any chance we can go to Lake Stevens with me sometime soon to see 3 or 4 houses, blah, blah, blah. I said, of course. And then I said, I could have sworn we had a very specific conversation, quote, well, at least we know we never need to come back to Lake Stevens, end quote. Does that ring any bells? She wrote, LOL, that was before I gave myself permission to spend my cash. So she has a good amount of money, but she was trying to invest some and use the rest to buy, and now she's like, I'm gonna use it all to buy. That was the result of me challenging her. Because every time we went into a house and she was like, God, what a dump. Well, this is the price point that we're in. Or we can go further out. That conversation about never going back to Lake Stevens was because we were going that far out and still looking at dumps based on her price point. Now it changes, right? Right. I did that a month ago. Thankfully, it only went one day, wrote an offer, got mutual the same day. That was on Easter Sunday. All right. Let them know what else you're doing to aid in this process. What do you think that means?
What else are you doing than just showing them around, sending them listings?
Yeah.
I always tell people,
Finding off-market properties and opportunities, right? Reviewing canceled and expired. So many agents don't bother doing this. Like, think about all the last 20 times you heard someone talking about expired listings. I'll bet you 19 of the times, if not 20, was in the context of I'm looking for listings, trying to list those homes. I'm looking for sellers to hire me, right? It's not buyer's brokers looking at old listings that might still entertain an offer, right? What about the 19 offers that you wrote and didn't win? How many of those closed? Is it 100%? Probably not, right? That's why you build rapport with every listing broker that you write on. Not only does it increase the likelihood of your offer being accepted, but then they call you when one deal starts getting squirrely. Hey, Yaron, has your client bought anything yet? Because the current buyer on that house on Meadow Road is starting to balk, or their financing is getting shaky, whatever. Would you rather get that phone call or not? Right? So how do you treat that apathy, that buyer fatigue?
Dairy Queen.
Dairy Queen. There you
Under
go.
promise, over deliver.
Uh,
From the beginning, set out
Yeah.
that you're not, in this market, you're probably not gonna get the first house you put an offer on. We're gonna try our best, but, the average is, I've heard 6, so.
I would, I'd be careful with that, because you're on the right track. You just have to be careful how you say it, because you don't want to be discouraging, right?
Yeah, you don't lead off with that, but,
Right. The average is 6. Our average is actually 2 as a firm. So we have a really high success rate relative to the market.
But if they think that they should get the first one, if they don't
Right.
know any better, then they're gonna be disappointed.
So here's how you do it, Mark. You coach them to write the most
She might be calling back.
What?
That phone that's ringing in the corner of the TV.
Oh, it's not a phone call, it's somebody's logged in remotely.
Okay.
And they're listening that way. Yeah, there's a few people, I think. See?
Okay.
But thank you. You encourage them to write the strongest offer possible. And then if you lose, that's when you have this sort of conversation, right? But it starts by reaching out to this listing broker, and you have to have rapport in order for them to be transparent with you.
Okay.
And you find out how many offers did you get, how much did we lose by, what place did we come in out of all those offers. Then I take that information, I go back to my client, and I tell them how it worked out, right? And I don't do it in a discouraging fashion, I do it in an encouraging fashion that we gotta be more aggressive on the next one.
Well, but then also letting them know that this market, there can be some crazy people out there, and there's no way you'd want to win the offer at what this went for, because
Right.
it's just nuts.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Right, if we lost by 50 grand, let them feel better that I wasn't ever gonna pay that, right? And you just never know when some crazy buyer is gonna go right to the moon, right? But here's what I always end this conversation with. And you know what, Mark? We're gonna find you that right property. And I have never had a buyer grieve the one that got away when we found the right one. It's always been an even better house. So just find comfort in that. I'm not saying it's gonna be the next one. We're just gonna do our best to find it. And when you win, you're gonna love it, all right? And that's usually enough to get them to feel, to help them through the 5 stages of grief, right? We want them to get to acceptance so we can move on and write on the next house. All right, so you gotta be positive. Buyer fatigue is a mental game, right? Emotional health and happiness are major predictors of physical health and length of life, with optimists living 8 to 9 years longer than pessimists. In fact, pessimism is roughly equivalent to smoking 2.5 packs of cigarettes a day.
It's real.
It's crazy, isn't it? This is a byproduct of positive psychology, which has only been around for about 25 years. But if you don't focus on the good things, you run the risk of being a pessimist, right? I have a social media post that I put out, I don't know, maybe twice a year. And it's a picture of a glass of water with water like sloshing out of it. And it says, "My glass isn't half full, it's just full." And that's the way I feel, right? Because you have to have that self-confidence so that when you're with a buyer, they feel it, right? Because your clients are going to reflect whatever emotion or positivity or, God forbid, negativity that you have, right? So when you get an offer that doesn't win, you can't go, "God damn son of a," right? Because what are they going to do? They're going to do the same thing. They're going to feel like they got screwed. And they didn't. They got beat. They didn't get screwed. Make sense? So how many of you are smoking 2.5 packs of cigarettes a day?
I'm up to 3 now.
Emotional. Yeah.
No, I'm
You're really pessimistic.
I'm actually pretty positive.
You're
guy.
a pretty positive guy. You guys have heard me talk probably too much about positive psychology, right? This is the dialogue I was sharing with Mark just a minute ago, right? But you have to be able to say it with conviction. You have to be able to get them to feel like, yeah, you know what? That house wasn't perfect. Because really, in the end, when you gather a client's requirements and nice to haves, there's going to be 10 to 15 features that they're looking for, right? How often are all 15 in the house that they end up buying?
Rarely.
Never. Heidi whispered never.
Yeah,
The answer is
exactly.
never.
There's always one, we can live with that, but all these other things.
Real estate's about compromise, right? And that's why we call it requirements and nice to have, because what might be a nice to have can migrate over to the requirements side once they look at some houses and go, yeah, I kind of thought that would be cool. Now I know I have to have that, right? So we actually help facilitate them letting go of some features by calling them nice to haves, right? It's just a simple psychological trick, but it allows them to feel better about not getting some of those things. All right, we're gonna find a better one, right? You have to have an acute awareness when there's even the slightest loss, right? You have to look at your client's face and their eyes and see if it's a couple, if both of them take it, you know, in stride, or if one of them just looks devastated. You have to recognize that, right? Don't overreact to it, just recognize that it exists and listen for lingering references, right? If they say in the moment, that's fine, we'll just keep looking, but then the next time you're out, the husband is pining for the one that got away, and then the next time you're out, the husband's like, did you find out if that one closed? And the next time you're out, it brings it up again. You got a problem, right? That means that you weren't convincing enough in these two dialogues. And you should dig in right then and there, the minute you recognize it. Hey, Joe, let's talk about that one. Because there's going to be other ones that we might not win on, and I don't want you to feel such a terrible sense of loss. Because you know what? When we find the right one, you're not going to miss that one on Main. Because the right one's going to be even better. I can guarantee you that. Right? I mean, I've been doing this 31 years. I've never, not even once, had a buyer go, yeah, this one's fine, but I sure wish we got that other one. Not even once. They fall in love, right? They fall out of love when their offer doesn't get accepted, but then they fall in love with the next one. When you sense that one or both are feeling beaten or lost, you have to increase your effort, right? Because remember, it only takes one of them to put the brakes on. And the minute you recognize it, you got to step up your game. How do you do that?
Talk to them more.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's be upfront.
You got to be empathetic, right? Let them know that you feel lost too,
Yeah.
right? I really did like that one. I thought that was a good fit for you. What's exciting to me is that I know the one you ultimately buy is going to be even better than that one. And you have to be able to say that with confidence, right? And you might not always feel that confident. You might be thinking, man, that has been the most perfect one yet. We've still got our teeth kicked in, right? But remember, this is a process. Along the process, you're listening and recognizing grieving in your client, but you're also coaching and encouraging so that each time they write an offer, it's a more aggressive offer. The crazy, stupid buyer who writes 50 grand over that Mark was referencing is the buyer that lost 5 times previously, right? Or worse, longer, more, whatever.
Or maybe they just have more money than sense.
You know,
And then they're gonna regret
statistically,
buying that for, you know, all of a sudden they're gonna realize, oh man, this house was not worth, it's probably not 50,000 over, it's worth $200,000 over.
that's true, right? Sometimes buyers who are getting their teeth kicked in the 500,000 point or 700,000 point step down to 600,000 because they figure they can overbid by more, right? And then they have some regret. And that's usually the buyer that you lose to because you weren't willing to overspend like that to your clients. Right? You need to make it fun again. It's not always easy, is it? When they're frustrated and stressed out. Sometimes taking them out to lunch in the middle of one of your upcoming showings will pay huge dividends. Especially if you inject alcohol. This Bellingham one I was just talking about. We looked at 15 properties and had 2 blue moons in the middle of it. And it worked out, right? But it can be a grind for people, and especially when they're losing a lot.
To grind on us.
For sure, right? And you don't get, if you're a pro, you don't get the luxury of being able to vent at all, right?
And if you're driving around, you don't even get the luxury of the blue moon.
Right. So figure out ways to make it enjoyable for them. Right? Different times of day, different times of week, different areas, mixing in meals. Sometimes going on a tour without going in a single house is a great opportunity to reconnect and bond with your client. How can you do that? Off-market properties.
Get them in your car.
It's a two birds with one stone thing, right? Hey, you know what? I found some properties that I think meet your criteria. They're not on the market. We can't go inside yet, but let's go out and look at them and just drive by them. So if from the street they look like real candidates for you, then I'll try and coordinate getting inside. Pick a few expireds or canceled, pick some off our pre-market REO list if appropriate, off-market properties in a neighborhood that you know they like, right? But guess what? You get to spend a couple hours in the car with them, helping them work through the grieving process of the last loss, if there was one. Selena.
Yeah, so which step you do first? You contact the owner to see if we have potential buyer, or we just approach to the buyer, hey, we have potential property? Which way you go?
I start with the latter. Let's drive them.
Okay.
Because I'm not going to approach every seller so that we can just drive by their house.
Yeah, but
We'll drive by their house first, and they'll go, yeah, out of those 5, we really like this one and this one. Okay, let me get to work for you then.
Okay.
And then I'll call the sellers and the door knock. I'll do whatever I have to.
Okay. Just not guarantee something before.
For sure, yeah.
Show them.
Yeah.
Then we may
But
not-
you want to say it to them the way I just said it earlier, so that they feel like everyone they're looking at is a potential home they could buy.
Okay.
Even though I know statistically it's not true, right? But my real mission is to re-engage and get them excited again and give them hope.
I don't want to hope gone.
Yeah, yeah.
You don't want to hope gone once you find out it's nothing later.
Yeah,
That's my honest.
it won't happen that way,
Okay.
because you're gonna qualify, right? Okay, so you like those 2. Here's the backstory. That one was a canceled listing. What I have to determine is, did they cancel because their situation changed? Like maybe they were moving because of a new job and now the job's gone, and so they canceled because they're unwilling to sell it all. That one was an expired. That actually means they probably still would sell it, but their agent was not a very good agent. So let me get to work on those. So what I've done there, right, is I've inoculated you to, they may not pan out, but we're at least going to exhaust
Yeah.
every opportunity, right?
Yep.
Drive every effort toward the 3 R's. You heard me say re-engage, right? You want to re-engage, reignite, and recharge their batteries. Because think about it, that apathy that we were talking about, that's a growing distance between you and your client. Whether you believe it or not, it is, right? And if it goes on long enough and you get far enough away, they're going to think you're part of the problem. Don't let that happen, right? So let's dig into them, right? Engage. Aaron mentioned it earlier, right? They need to know that you care too, right? You can demonstrate care by showing grief, but you need to make sure anytime you show that, man, that sucks, I really like that one, that ends with a comma, not a period. The comma is followed by, but we're gonna find a better one, right?
A client told me yesterday, we've looked at more homes than I can keep up with, but well, that's not true, just a lot.
Yeah.
And she's been looking since January and switched from her other agent to me. Long story short, she said yesterday, I'm really comfortable with you because you fight for us. And that was a big compliment.
That's
She'd be
huge.
like, thank you, because she said her other agent just, oh, sorry, we didn't win it.
Yeah.
And wouldn't circle back to say why, or would only give them this amount of time. And I understand we can only do what we do, but.
So what specifically did you do that gave them the impression you were fighting?
There's a home they really are in love with in Magnolia on the water. It's beautiful, but they don't feel it's worth what it's listed at.
Yeah.
The owners have already come down $200,000 for them, and it's still not where they want to be.
What do they base their opinion of value on?
On their estate, they sold in Mercer Island.
Different market.
Different. That's exactly what I tell them.
Did you do a color picture CMA tour?
Did not do that yet, but I did.
Yet being the operative word, you should have already done that.
Right.
Because you wrote an offer that was 200 below?
I offer that was 100 below. No. I wrote an offer that was 400 below.
Yeah. Don't
And-
write any, this is true for all of
And
you.
this was,
Don't let your clients write offers without doing a CMA on the house.
well, they,
And we have a
Yeah.
process, Heidi, called the color picture CMA tour. We don't just give them data, we have them look at photos and guess what these homes sell for. And what ends up happening is there's a psychological effect that we're going for. And I want to hear the rest of your story, but this is important, right? The psychology of it is that as humans, we are all wired to enjoy competition.
Mhm.
We like game shows and quizzes and contests. That's in our human DNA, right? So when I'm talking to, I'll use a seller as the example because it shows kind of the clearest how this works. When I sit down with a seller, let's say Mark's my seller and he wants to sell his house and he thinks it's worth $1 million, right? When we first sit down, his belief that his home is worth $1 million is at its premium, and his desire to win at this little game that we're going to play is at almost zero because he didn't realize we were going to play a game today. But I actually say, hey, Mark, we're going to play a little game today. I use that word specifically because I want to trigger this sense. Put the first house in front of him, and he looks at it and he goes, well, if mine, in his head, if mine's $1 million, that one better have sold for $1.2 million. Or something like that, right? He starts shaping his answers based on his desire to get $1 million. So he guesses $1.2 million. I flip it over and say, actually, that one sold for $959. But that's okay. We're gonna look at a bunch of them. Give him the next one. What happened is the $959 just injured his sense that he's going to get $1 million, and it frustrated him that he got it wrong by $300,000 or $250,000, right? So this grew a little bit. The next house, he's going to get closer, but he's still going to be wrong, and his $1 million in his head is becoming more realistic, and his desire to win is becoming more powerful, and they end up trading places. By the end of 4, 5, maybe 6 homes, they start pegging the value on the last one. And then you go, okay, based on these homes, and you sort them from lowest to highest, from right to left, if you're facing them, so it's left to right to them, where does your home fit on this spectrum? Well, it's bigger than this one, but that one's nicer than mine, it's gonna go in between those. Boom. Now we know your home's worth $925 or whatever, right? With a buyer, we do the same thing, it's just with someone else's house, and we're fitting it on that same spectrum so that they can be realistic. So back to Aaron's dilemma, right? They write an offer that's $500,000 below. Give us specific numbers. What's the list price?
185,
All right? And you wrote at 1.3? Okay.
and then they escalated to 1425, so we wrote for 1425.
So it was a review date kind of deal?
No, still in the market.
Why'd you put an escalator in?
They wanted, well, let me back up, we didn't.
Okay.
we wrote it 1.3 and they countered, we countered back 1.425.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. So they came down to 165.
They came down to 1.75, then they came down to 1.65,
Yeah. So you're
That's where we're at right now.
225 apart,
Mhm.
and you never did a CMA, you should have.
I
Because
didn't-
your client would be more realistic. Right now, they're basing their opinion on irrelevant data.
I did show them what sold. There was a house, two houses down that sold for 1.4, it was complete tear down.
Right.
And then there was, yeah, I did do a proper CMA, but I
Do you
did
see
show
the
them.
difference between
Totally.
showing somebody one listing as a data point
Yeah,
versus this process of letting their brain evolve to, oh
Yeah.
man, it's worth more than we thought?
I showed them three, two
Okay.
that are on the market currently, and then one that currently, the one that sold, two houses down.
Yeah.
Those are the, I mean, it wasn't a proper CMA, but it did show them comps.
Here's my final bit of advice,
Follow what Ed says here.
because I want this on the video.
Do what Ed says.
No,
Yeah.
no, that's self-serving. Really though, it's
That's
more,
my line.
it's more along the lines of,
Right.
why would you do anything that decreases your chances of success?
Right.
Right? You have tools available to you, use them. And use all of them, because you never know which one's gonna be the one that triggers the win, right?
Yep.
So, I've cut corners myself, and every time I've done it, I've looked back and gone, I skipped that step and it came back to bite me. So guess what? It took 31 years to figure out, but I stopped skipping steps. All right, so re-engage. Make sure they know you're invested. I love Aaron's description of they loved him because he fights for them, right? So good job. That data set will help you convince that listing broker too to be more realistic if that's what it shows. Right? You want to show empathy, which means grieve without going overboard. You want them to know that you want it as bad as they do, but that you've been there before, right? And it can take some patience. You guys are all Sherpas, right? You're a guide on this little mission, this tour. And they're going to take their cues from you. So a quiet confidence is critical. You can't be shaken by a loss, right? That's probably one of the things that impresses me most about Janice. With only just a few years in the business, she got to a quiet confidence very quickly. Because she would probably admit initially it was quiet because she wasn't sure about stuff. But she never blinked, and she was able to develop the skill set while she was growing. So that's a really important thing to develop if you don't already have it. Reignite, right? So I engaged by showing empathy and sympathy and grieving with them. Now I gotta spark the interest again, right? Well, why did they get into this in the first place? Right? We always talk about their emotional why, but it's hard to remember why you're in this after you've now written your 5th offer and still came in 7th place or whatever, right? All you can focus on when you're in that condition is, man, we're not even close, right? You need to remind them, hey, what pain are we solving, right? Think of a buyer that you're actively showing right now, Elliot. Get their name in your head.
Okay.
What is their emotional why?
To not live in a trailer park anymore,
That's pretty powerful, right?
I'd say.
And that's pretty motivating if you wrote 5 offers in a row and lost every time.
It would be.
How many offers have you written for him?
Just 3.
Right? I know if we went down his funnel, his Focus 15, he would know that answer on every single one of them. Most of you would as well on most of them. You need to know specifically on all of them. And that's a question that you can ask verbatim, right? Emotional why is a real estate vernacular, but a consumer understands what you're getting at. Tell me your why. What's your emotional why? Well, my wife's pregnant with triplets and we're hosed if we don't find a new place, right? To which I would make a joke. You got nobody to blame but yourself, buddy. right? So remind them of the pain, because that nerve will be exposed. They just won't be thinking about it. And you're not doing it in a negative way. But you're just going, man, I can't wait to help you get out of that trailer park. Right? Then pull out your requirements and nice to haves again. So, Heidi, you don't work here yet in the presumptive close, you like that?
Yeah.
But we have folders out in front. And if you grab a buyer folder, you'll see there's just a single sheet that we use to have this conversation. Right? We learn about square footage, bed, bath, school district type stuff, but then we also get into the sort of intangibles. Here's a magic paintbrush. If you could paint into this home any feature that you like, what would it be? Gourmet kitchen, great Roman style, whatever. So if they're starting to get discouraged, pull that thing out again. Help them, number one, reminisce back to that first day, because that first day you met with them was exciting, because they were launching into this process, right? But then go through it and figure out what's changed, because over time, they all change. Requirements become less required, nice to haves become requirements, new features come into play. And most of the time, you aren't really updating that sheet as you're looking at houses, right? So reconnect, collect your thoughts, find out what they need, and revisit that sheet of paper. And make it fun, right? Now you have the context of homes you've already shown. Could you imagine if we took the kitchen from that one on Main Street and we got the backyard of that other one, right? Help them visualize success, right? The best way to achieve a goal is to know exactly how you're going to get there, right? Recharge. So we re-engaged, we got tighter with our customer, we reignited and sparked the interest, right? Now we got to give them the energy to get out there and try it again. Is that easy? Not really, right? It gets easier, though, if you did a good job of the reigniting. Right? The reason it's not easy is there's a difference between physical and emotional exhaustion. Which one do you think's worse?
Definitely.
It's not even close, right? Do you know why? Why would emotional exhaustion be more taxing than physical exhaustion?
Because emotional doesn't stop.
Yeah, you can't
It's not
escape it.
rational sometimes.
Yeah, it can be irrational.
And also
Emotion-
the impact in physical
Yep.
as well. When you're emotionally exhausted, physically you will exhausted as well.
You're exactly right. The difference is one affects the other, but the other doesn't affect one. You can be physically exhausted and your brain is working just fine. But if you're emotionally exhausted, you can destroy your physical, right? Even though physical fatigue has little to no impact on mental alertness, the reverse is true. The psychological realm has a great deal of impact on the physical. And think about this whole phenomenon, buyer fatigue. It is nothing but emotional exhaustion, right?
Yeah.
And it's spread out over weeks, and if we're not doing a very good job, months,
Uh-oh.
right? It can be devastating. So you're really performing a service when you help people kind of work through this, recollect themselves, and get back on a path towards their goal of getting away from whatever the pain is, right? All right. What's a good way to do that? I can recharge your battery by giving you hope, right?